What's up, everybody? Welcome to the week 5 review of the SB50 Week Cinematography Challenge. And the challenge for week 5 was the horizontal rule of thirds. As you can see in the picture back here, I talked about this in the episode, in the challenge. And before we get into the review, Scott can't be with us today. Make sure you are signed up and subscribe to his channel, which is linked below. I'll even throw it up over my shoulder here. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to this channel as well, as we bounce this stuff back and forth. And sometimes we're going to just have one of us, sometimes we'll have both of us, depending on how our schedules work out. Also, if you have any friends that are in photography, videography, cinematography, filmmaking, invite them to this group. Let's get them on the let's get them in the Facebook group, and let's get some more interaction in here. And that way, we can all learn something from each other, as Scott likes to say, and really build this community up like what we want. So, without further ado, let's go into the first video to review, and you're going to see Teemo's video right here. Now, all I've got to say is, Teemo, what were you thinking? We wanted horizontal rule of thirds, and here you go out with a drone. You're using it in a slide pattern, and you have the perfect horizontal rule of thirds. You've got the top half is the top third is the sky, the bottom third is the roadway and the boardwalk, the middle third is the water, separates the scene nicely, and you've got the drone with the slide with the person walking. I thought it was fantastic, perfect example. Now, as we go into the other videos, I want to explain that the rule of thirds is more of a composition modifier rather than a technique, and we've got to make sure that we have compositions right when we use our techniques. And as we learn more techniques going into the future, we're going to implement the rule of thirds and other composition modifiers as well. So right now we're on the rule of thirds. We're going to blend in some of the techniques we've got, such as with the slide that Teemo did, and that's going to help us build our skills. The second one, we want to go over Geralds, and you can see it right here. For Geralds, it's a loosely fit rule of thirds. It's not the exact lines. You've got the foreground, which is the grass and the shrubbery, and that's your bottom third. Then you've got the house, which is kind of the focal point of the footage, and that's in the middle part. And then you've got the sky with the clouds. He ran a time lapse, and we get that gives the motion to it. He also did, I'm guessing it's possibly a slide, or it's a slide or a pan. It looks like a slide from what I can tell. So you have the movement in the foreground. You've got the time lapse up above, so that brings the intrigue into the footage there. And like I said, it's a loosely fit rule of thirds. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's how your eyes are trained, and he does have it separated into thirds. Now, the third one we're going to go over is Christies. And she's implementing both vertical and horizontal in this, as the father and the infant are on one of the vertical rule of thirds, and then the scene is set up where the father's eyes and face, the main part here, is in that top thirds, and that kind of runs a line along with the back edge of the bed and where the wall starts. In the foreground, you've got the infant, and the infant's on the bottom part of the thirds as well as on that vertical, and you've got the darkened shadows on the foreground of the bed and the bedspread there that gives you that separation in the rule of thirds as well. The next one we're going to talk about Lewis's. Like Gerald, he used a time lapse. He didn't have any motion in it. It was more of a static still setting. So he put a time lapse to give some motion to the footage. And again, he's got on the bottom third, he has the foreground, which is the darkened landscape, and then you've got the sky behind it. And then off on one side, he's utilizing the vertical rule of thirds with the deer stand, hunting stand, I assume is what it is, on one side. And it's the rule of thirds. That's what we're looking for. We're building the compositions so that we can go further into our cinematography. For our next one, Abu, he implemented several techniques into his footage here, and basically you have the gentleman that's painting, and he uses like a focus rack to go from the gentleman to the painting to change the focus. But he also has the rule of thirds playing in there with the top part of the painting, the way it separates the top, and it comes across the eyes of the painter, and that gives you your top third. And then basically the mouth is on the bottom third point, but he's got that top portion, and then the 2/3 at the bottom is the bottom portion. When we do the rule of thirds, we don't necessarily have to have it separated where here's a distinct line and here's a distinct line. It's just 1/3 works. So if all of this was a beautiful sky without the banding here, you still got the rule of thirds with the bottom part here. But we want to put the emphasis on the sky if that was the case. Where if everything was more interesting in the foreground, then we would want the foreground and the landscape and the horizon to be here. Emphasize the foreground here with the sky, whether it's blue or gray, nothing dramatic in the sky to bring attention to. We would keep that as the smaller portion of the third. So just because we're using rule of thirds doesn't mean we need something on every third. It means our separation points are at the third marks, not center line. Next, we'll go over Genevi's. And got the pup there laying down, and I thought it was kind of cute the way that the dog's eyes was looking to the side and blinking, and just a nice little setting there. Again, the rule of thirds is used very nicely. They're at an angle, but it's still the rule of thirds. It gives you that same pleasant look where you've got the background's brighter, then you've got the dark puppy there, and then the foreground is basically what the pup's laying on. So you're getting the rule of thirds. That's what we're looking for, and it brings our attention to the pup's eyes and his face. That's immediately where my eyes trailed. Turn around. My eyes followed up to the dog's face to really catch the emphasis on the eyes. And lastly, on Kevin's, which we've got right here, his is separated with the sky, the building, which goes most of the way over actually to one of the vertical rule of thirds, and then the foreground is the lawn, the grass that leads up to the building, and then you've got cars that are coming by on the roadway that you can't see. That's at the top of the lawn, and it separates the lawn and the building very nicely. It's a perfect rule of thirds as far as the way it's set up. Now again, I just kind of pointing out what we've got here because we're building composition, and the composition means so much going forward that as we learn more techniques, we want to implement it all together, because we've got a story that we're going to tell at the end of this, and it's going to be each of your own stories. and that's kind of where we're headed with it. So let's do that, and keep that in mind on our challenges moving forward. We want to implement these rules. We're going to introduce some other rules, such as the rule of odds, the rule of symmetry, and some things like that going forward as well. So let's get out there. Let's get this next week's challenge done. We'll have the other review for you this week, and let's make 2019 a fantastic year.